Good evening, dear participants. So welcome to lecture 2 of this 15-day lecture series on history of English literature. And today our honorable resource person will be speaking on a very important and one of the precursor age of history of English literature, that is the age of Chaucer. And to discuss the age of Chaucer, we have among us Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty. Some of you all might know him because he has been kind enough to come and deliver lectures on this platform of ours. And on behalf of Team DAATH Voyage, I would like to take the opportunity and the honor of introducing Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty to all of you all. Dr. Pritesh Chakraborty presently is working as an assistant professor of English at Acharya Surya Kumar Sen Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal in India, and he's a former Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant at New York University from 2018 and 19. He has obtained his PhD from West Bengal State University and his MPhil degree from Calcutta University, and he's researching on a very important and interesting work that is on the superhero comic books of Batman and Indian comics. Besides, he is also interested in creative writing and has published a long story in Kindle Direct Publishing. He has also penned a couple of scripts for comic books, which is awaiting publication, and has published several articles in national and international journals and has chapters in books, and has attended few seminars and conferences both India and abroad. On behalf of Team DAATH Voyage, welcome Dr. Pritesh once again. Thank you for accepting our invitation and speaking on a topic which I'm sure you will make it interesting in your own humorous way, with a lot of fun and a lot of intellectual creativity. Without wasting much time, the platform is all yours, Dr. Pritesh. Thank you once again and welcome.
Thank you so much. So today I'm going to speak on the age of Chaucer, up and close. The personal has been put off for particular reasons. So this lecture, this deliberation is not going to be on Chaucer only, but mainly on Chaucer, since the age is named after Chaucer. But I will try to touch upon the features of the age as such, as to what was going on when Chaucer was creating his poetry, writing his narrative poems. So let's go into the presentation. So okay, so to introduce, I would try to put this age of Chaucer roughly between 1350 to 1450. It was during this period that whatever we are going to discuss today actually happened. And in the background of this slide is an image of a day in a bazaar, in a market, in London. And we need to understand that Chaucer basically was a London person, and many of the things that we will discuss will be concentrated in and around London. So during this period of 100 years, and it is considered to be one of the shortest periods of English literature, and whoever among the participants, especially if they are from West Bengal and if they are appearing for the College Service Commission, a question often arises that in demo, which age should I prepare a demo on? There's a section on a demonstration, and I think the shorter the age, the lesser the number of the things that you have to deal with, and hence you will have a more thorough and a more comprehensive knowledge of that particular age. And I think this age with just 100 years span might be helpful in that regard. And you can also note down the exact dates from which this begins and ends. However, I must tell you that Chaucer as such, Chaucer himself was dead by 1400. So the age extended 50 years after his death also. So we need to keep these things in mind. Now, during this period, a sense of modernity creeps in during this period, even when Renaissance was 150 years yet. So, if you consider 350 to be the period when the Age of Chaucer begins, there was a sense of modernity. Modernity in terms of questioning the obvious. Modernity in terms of skepticism, both against a given belief that God will do everything and God is responsible and God is going to do everything for you. So the shift, which I often talk about in my classes, the shift that was discernible in the Renaissance, the shift was from the theocentric worldview to the homocentric worldview. This shift did not happen overnight. Like you woke up one day and it's Renaissance and you say, okay, there is no God. And okay, I need to do everything on my own, starting from my laundry to my gardening. God is not going to help me. This did not happen in a day. This did not happen in a century. In fact, it was a slow process, and even when Renaissance was like quite a few years to come, modernity in that sense, a kind of an advancement over the present situations was already happening in England, especially especially in London. And as I said, that modernity in this sense refers to a sense of skepticism, a sense of gradual realization that there are things beyond the church, beyond the monarchy even. And we need to remember that the Magna Carta had already taken place a century ago, where the rights of the common people or the rights of the people in general were written down, were noted down. However, as we will find later on into this presentation, that these rights and the duties of the king and all these political considerations did not really take place as they should have had taken place. Okay. Now, this age is also remarkable for the establishment of the English prose style. Old English poetry was poetry, Middle English poetry and drama was there. We will say, we can say that even in the Old English period, there was prose, mostly translation. But here, in this age, in the age of Chaucer, and thanks to Chaucer also, that the English prose style, known for its straightforwardness, known for its crispness, known for its masculinity as such, was established, was not born, but established. Then there was the rise of the Scottish literature. So Scotland as a separate entity, Scottish literature as a separate uh, aesthetic experience was also getting its foothold. And then the standardization of the English language into the East Midlands speech. English language got standardized, and the dialect which became more powerful thanks again to the use of the same by Chaucer and other poets and writers, because when one poet or writer takes up one particular dialect, it becomes powerful. It achieves a sense of respect, and that is what happened during the age of Chaucer. Sorry. Is the PPT moving? Okay, yeah, now it is.
Yeah, it's moving. Please
yeah,
carry.
thank you. So the first thing that we need to look into is the social condition, because any book of English literature, especially if you follow Edward Albert, which I follow very closely, I think it's neat, it's nice to understand before we try to understand the literary features of a particular age, we might try to understand the social conditions of a particular age also, because it is the social conditions which harbor the conditions for the development of a particular form of literature. Okay, that is an old school belief, but in some ways, I believe it is still true that the age is reflected in the pages of the literature written by the poets. So, Black Death, which was a bubonic plague, it raged not just in England but in entire Europe from 1346 to 1353. And this becomes significant because a similar pandemic has been raging in our contemporary world since 2020. So Black Death was, well, of course, more sinister. It was responsible for killing half of the population of the Europe, and COVID also did something like that. So the social condition was framed and formed by the spread of the Black Death, and it has its reflection in Chaucer's text also, especially in Canterbury Tales. There is this doctor who has made a lot of money, and he has made that money through gold. And where has he found this gold? He has found this gold in the dead bodies of the people. Not the kind of gold that you might be thinking of, but the gold from the teeth. The people used to have these golden teeth, and the doctor who, well, had to carry out an autopsy, or maybe he was there when the patient died, would take away the golden teeth, and hence he became quite rich. And this commentary on the doctor becoming rich after the bubonic plague, after the Black Death, is relevant today also. I mean, maybe a couple of years ago, there was this raging complaints. The complaints were pouring in against corrupt doctors who were trying to keep even dead bodies in the ventilators to earn a little money. But then the COVID happened, and things went in a very different direction. Anyway, so what I'm saying is the social condition was modulated by one of the greatest disasters that happened in Europe, and that was Black Death. And ironically, when I was reading about this Black Death, I found that even this Black Death actually was carried from Asia into Europe via the ships, via the black rats, brown rats, black rats, and bat, rat. I see a kind of an omen here. Anyway, so more importantly, then the transition of Europe, including England, from feudalism to emergent merchant class and middle class society. I remember reading in a history book that Napoleon Bonaparte once called the Britishers a nation of shopkeepers. And if you remember Arms and the Man, there also the English people have been termed as shopkeepers and mercenaries and servile merchants and things like that. So it was during this period, it was during this 1350 to 1450, that Europe, including England, made a shift, made a transit from feudalism to mercantilism, and a middle class gradually grew up in the society. And how is this responsible for the development of literature can be understood by an analogy that when you are, say, a middle class person, maybe like me, I go to work, I work in a factory, maybe I work in a factory for 10 hours, 12 hours, but I come back, I still have like 1 or 2 hours in my hand to read, to enrich myself intellectually. When I am a merchant, I might have a little money to buy book rather than completely depending upon a 24-hour work which happened under the feudal lords. Middle class people or merchants got two important things in their hand: one, time, and another, a little money to be spared on buying or reading a book. But I'm not saying that there were libraries. I'm not saying that there were bookshops where people used to go and buy books. Of course, Amazon was not established back then. So then another point about the social condition is that the guilds and merchant groups gradually found themselves in a dominant position. It was during this time that guilds of merchants, like iron guilds and coppersmiths, and people who were making textile, say for example, wife of Bath is included in the list of pilgrims, because I think she belonged to one of these guilds, and she perhaps was the member of one of the most powerful guilds in England that dealt with textile and merchandise. So gradually they became more dominant in the group. And I believe that, I mean, if you have a merchant mentality, if you are a merchant, if you are a businessman, you would think about growing your business. You would think about earning a little profit, consolidating your profit. You, unlike the aristocrats, will not be indulged only in expanding your ego. You will rather think about expanding your business, right? And but the aristocrats who had the money from their feudal setups did hardly ever cared about expanding their business as such. They did care about expanding their territories, and that got themselves into wars. But these merchant groups, these guilds, they wanted peace in the society. They wanted to develop trade and business relationships with France, with other countries, so that they can sell their stuff. And that is a shift, that is a difference that happened. In fact, Chaucer's parents, Chaucer's family, perhaps was a prosperous wine merchant. They were selling wine, though the name Chaucer itself refers to shoemakers. Chaucer refers to some kind of a person who makes shoes and stuff, but they were actually wine merchants. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So the political scenario, even if the guilds and the merchant classes were trying to become powerful and they were gaining strength in the society, even then the aristocrats and the monarchs were still there in their prime. Okay, they were still calling the shots. And in 1337, 100 years war with France started over a number of issues, like French people wanted to control England because they had the taste of controlling England some 300 years ago via the Norman conquest, and they again wanted to come back to England and rule over England. But England had already become a equally militarily powerful country with a developing naval power, and hence these two superpowers started to engage in war, and one war lasted like 100 years. And then within that, there came the peasants' revolt. On the right side of the screen, like on my screen, on the right side, top right side corner, we find an image, we find a portrait of Wat Tyler. And this peasant revolution revolt happened in, not a revolution, but a revolt happened in 1381. And this was this was an outcome of the way in which the peasants were treated by the aristocracy. Even if I already told you about this Magna Carta in the 1280s time in England, which said that there should be like equal pay for equal work and equal there should be some kind of a charter of rights for the peasants and for the even the lowest of all the rungs of the society. But things were just on that charter. Things were not happening in real. And people like Wat Tyler, peasants, farmers, they were taxed heavily because of the 100 Years' War. You see how these things are related? So when we are thinking about talking, or when we are thinking about a history of English literature, we must also think in terms of cause and relationship. That will help us remember what happened when and why. It will also help us remember as to in what age something happened and in another age what happened. Because if you can see, this 100 Years War started in 1337 and the peasants revolt was happened in 1381. However, we should also remember that this was one peasants revolt, and it was the most popular because Wat Tyler had gone to the doorsteps of the London monarchy, which many other peasant revolts which took place and have been silenced hence did not or could not. So we will be wrong if we say that this is the peasants revolt. No, it was one of the many peasants revolt, but it did achieve a sense of popularity because it was kind of widespread, more widespread than some regional peasants revolts that were going on time and again. Also, if you pay attention to the date of this particular revolt, it happened in the lifespan of Chaucer himself. Yet Chaucer did not paint the plowman in a bad light. That goes on a long way to show that Chaucer was very much humane. Chaucer had sympathy. Chaucer had empathy for these people. And it becomes more important that what am I saying about Chaucer becomes more important because Chaucer himself belonged to the aristocracy. Like he was in the service of the kings and the queens. He was an ambassador, and the peasants' revolt targeted this aristocracy, killed a number of them. And yet, in his portrayal of the plowman is one of the most honest person in the text, most revered person in the text, I would say. He is presented in a positive light. He is presented in a empathetic light. This period was under the rule of two or three kings. Okay, the first being the reign of Edward III, that lasted from 1327 to 1377. Yes, he is that son of Edward II in Christopher Marlowe's text, Edward II, and he did rule for a very long period. Like he ruled for 50 years, and during his rule, though there were wars, though there were frequent clashes, and there was a lot of human rights violations in his reign, but it was an age of consolidation for the political, as far as the politics of England is concerned. And then came Richard II in 1377, and he ruled until the revolution of 1399, when Bolingbroke assumed kingship. So after that, Bolingbroke, Henry was continuing the kingship. So Edward, Richard, Henry, these three ERH, you can remember, they went from they were the ruling people, and I have tried to present all of these people like Richard II and Edward III in these kinds of pictures. And I have tried to select this kind of an imagery because this somehow reflects the middle age typography of representing a particular king or a particular important person. But Wat Tyler's image, you can see, is from a different angle altogether, which of course happened a few, maybe a few centuries later. This image was drawn a few centuries later, and who knows if Wat Tyler really looked like this. Next is, next is the religious milieu. Of course, the church was corrupt, the clergy was corrupt. And how do we know this? Not just from the history books, not just from reading of the research on the corruption of church and clergy uh, back in that day, but we also know about this from the characters of the monk, the prioress, the priest, the pardoner, the summoner. I mean, their characters themselves, their appearance themselves seem to be a kind of a testimonial to this corruption that was rampant in the church and the clergy. I mean, of course, the Age of Chaucer was following the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. Now, the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, as I already talked about, everything was theocentric. Everything was in the hand of God. Everything was, either made by God or marred by God. God is in the center of everything. And hence, the representatives of gods or the priests who can talk to gods or who can talk on your behalf to the gods were the clergy, where the father of the church, the bishop, the monk, the prioress, the nun, the pardoner, the summoner, so on and so forth. And hence, when too much power is concentrated in the hands of a few people, we know what happens. And hence, the church and the clergy had become corrupt. And Chaucer was very satiric against this whole corrupt institution. Most of the characters that he portrays are corrupt, and they show that the church was rotten inside. Okay, and this corruption often led to clashes with the monarchy, not because the monarchy was like any good people who wanted to save the common people from the corruption of the church, but the clashes between the monarchy and the church was on the point of who will have more power, because the church was becoming rich and richer and richer. And back then, even as today, I think many religious institutions do not have to pay any money to the government. They do not need to pay taxes. And back then, the church was powerful, and the church said that we will not pay you any taxes. And they were living a life of, they were the real gangsters as such. So nobody dared touch them. But the monarchy, especially Richard II, and his skirmishes with the church, climaxed in the execution of Saint Thomas a Becket, to whose pilgrimage these people, these pilgrims in Canterbury Tales are actually going. Canterbury is that place where Thomas a Becket is buried, and it is there which is becoming a kind of a pilgrimage spot for the pilgrims, and they were going there. The view of the cosmos or the view of the world was something like this on the bottom right hand corner. I'm sorry for the short um, script. The center is The center stage is taken by the earth. The earth was, according to the Middle Ages, according to the cosmic scheme of the Middle Ages, which was later changed by Copernicus and then again by Galileo. But even in Chaucer's time, the Middle Age, the belief that the cosmos, the system of cosmos that was thought to be in order in the Middle Ages was also followed in the Chaucerian age. And it was believed that the earth is in the middle of the universe, and the sun, the moon, and all the planets actually go around the earth and not the other way around. So it was a terra-centric worldview, which later changed into heliocentric, that is sun-centric worldview. So this was what was going on in the religious sphere. And then, okay, the economic condition. So as far as the economic condition is concerned, poverty was widespread, and a condition that was aggravated by the wars and the pandemic, not the COVID pandemic, the Black Death pandemic. And there were three distinguishable classes, and these distinctions have actually been made by Chaucer himself. Like Chaucer was saying that, you know, the society is economically divided into three stratas. The first being the aristocracy, and the character of the knight and the squire reflects it. And if you read Canterbury Tales, you would find that the tale begins with the description of the knight. Did you think that there was any particular reason as to why this was so? Of course, this is not an interactive thing, and you will not be able to answer me back. So I'll give the answer myself shamelessly. It is that because the knight was at the height of this social ladder. Of course, the king was, but curiously, in Canterbury Tales, we do not find the topmost and the bottommost categories of the society. We do not find the king and the queen. We do not find the beggars and the tramps in the Canterbury Tales. The reasons might be various, and when we will go into the character portraits of Canterbury Tales, then we might discuss it. But the aristocracy, as reflected by the knight and the squire, is to be found, is to be understood to be one of the dominant groups in the society. Then the church, the nun, the priest, the monk, and the parson are people who belong to this part, to this class. And then the working class, the plowman, the yeoman, the doctor. Even the doctor was working class. The doctor was not aristocracy as they are today. Okay, I hope there are no, I mean, nobody takes any offense, because I'm not saying that doctors are aristocrats, but the situation today is pretty, no, it has changed a lot, and the church and the religious institutions do not enjoy that amount of power. I mean, not at least in West Bengal, they do not enjoy that amount of power. But it depends where you go. Like if you go into a church, or if you go into a temple, you would find that the priest or the monk or these people are still powerful. Anyway, so the working class is reflected. The working class is signified by the plowman and the yeoman and the doctor, and even the innkeeper can be understood to be a person who belongs to the working class. Next, textiles and other labor-intensive industries were developing. And how do we know that? We know that from the character of the wife of Bath, because she's a textile mogul. She's like, you know, the Ekta Kapoor of textile industry, like this wife of Bath. So I hope you know who Ekta Kapoor is. So textile and other labor-intensive industries were already developing. So what happened a few centuries later was that with the coming of the power looms, with the harnessing of the steam engine, steam power, this labor-intensive industry went from hand to power. So the framework had already been established during this period, and it later led to this explosion of industrial output from England, which gave rise to the Industrial Revolution. Okay. I don't know why isn't it moving? Okay. Then comes the literary environment. Of course, you would find that how come literary environment is so bereft, so minuscule? Because I am saving the practical aspects of the things for the poets and the writers. So I'm just making just a few points as far as the literary environment is concerned. So there were romances, not the romance between the king and the queen, or any characters as such, or other people who would like to have romance with each other. Not that kind of romance. This romance is the name of the genre of romance that developed during this period, and it was an import from France and Italy, other continental countries. But romances were becoming very popular, and these romances were later formed into novels. So though there were no novels as such, like lengthy prose pieces as we know novels for, there were not, those things were not really there, but the possibility of them being developed was growing, was germinating in these romances. And there were like set formula for these romances, that there will be a hero, there will be a villain, there will be a beautiful queen, a princess, and this princess will be in trouble. The hero would save the queen or the princess, and there will be a dragon, and there will be this and that, and there will be a number of fights between the hero and the villain, and so on and so forth. So you can take up any I don't know, 90s Bollywood movies, you would find the same formula being repeated, only with a number of songs which were not there in the romances. So another important thing that I want to discuss about the literary environment is that impersonality, religious expressions, and didacticism. Impersonality. If you remember, most of the Old English poetry was anonymous. And I was attending the last lecture yesterday, and I found that the professor in the last deliberation also pointed this out, that most of Old English poetry is anonymous, and that anonymity was still being continued into this period. There are lots of literary exercises in the Chaucerian age which do not carry any name. In fact, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales or other works that he had created does not really contain a kind of a his name at the end of the work, and researchers had a difficult time in order to separate what was actually created by Chaucer and what was like done by some hack writer in the name of Chaucer. Anyway, so impersonality was still there. People used to believe that a piece of poem is not a place where you take credit for. However, within the poem, of course, there were a number of references to the poet himself, but in an oblique manner, not directly, not saying that, okay, I wrote this poem. Religious expressions, like religion was something that still dominated the entire atmosphere. Like religion was everything. Like there were exhortations in texts to be religious, to live a good life. There were no poems which actually glorified, people who did something evil, or who prospered doing something bad. And God was still the guardian, and the people were still considered to be the sheep of that benevolent God. God was still there. And didacticism. A lot of preaching and teaching was going on. Chaucer did try to say a lot of good things, but he did it in an exquisitely delicious manner. Whereas lesser writers were only saying that, you should do good, you should not steal, you should not, covet others' property, you should not do this, you should not do that. But Chaucer also did something similar in his Canterbury Tales or in his other works, but he sugar coated it, he poetry coated it rather, and presented us his didacticism, his brand of didacticism. And impersonality and anonymity of the poet are almost similar things, so I will not dwell on this, and I will move to the next slide. Condition of the language. I already pointed out earlier in the introduction that it was the time of standardization of the English language into the East Midland dialect. Now, I pointed out that this condition of language, the standardization of language, is done through literature. If you remember, one of the first dictionaries was created by Samuel Johnson, and creating a dictionary is something that helps in the standardization of a particular language. But another thing that helps in the standardization of language is the use of literature. When an established poet writes in a particular dialect, then that dialect achieves some kind of strength, some kind of vigor and respect, which East Midland dialect also gained, because East Midland dialect was spoken in and around London, and Chaucer was writing in the East Midland dialect. However, the orality of the English language kept it alive even under the onslaught of Latin preaching. So English basically was an oral language, like Bangal Bhasha. I mean, before the Bangladeshi name makers or TikTokers took over Facebook, YouTube, and whatever social networking sites there are, I found that Bangal Bhasha is spoken, but it is not written. Like when it is written in the usual standard language. But maybe now things have changed and there are changes in the script also to accommodate the Bangal Bhasha's dialect inside the Bengali language. But back then, the system of writing had not yet developed that much. It was under the lock and key of the church. Education was exclusive to the rich and to the powerful and anybody who wanted to go into the church. Hence, most of the language that went on in the English society went on in terms of the mouth, it went on in terms of the orality of the entire thing. And if you are hearing a band being played, I'm sorry, because there is a procession of somebody getting married or something. So sorry for that. I'll try to raise my voice further. So orality of the English language actually kept it alive. If it had been more of a pedantic writing thing, then maybe English language might have had lost to some other language, because we will do good to remember that English society was not just under the tremendous pressure of France as a superior cultural power, but it was frequently marauded. It was England was frequently attacked by Finland, Norway, Denmark, and so on. I mean, all the northern tectonic people were like coming in and attacking England during various periods of time, and there was a pressure of their language on English language also. Let's move further. Now let's enter into Geoffrey Chaucer, his life and times. So according to some sources, and now it has become kind of standardized, that Chaucer was born somewhere in 1343 to 44. Too bad back then we did not have birth certificates which we could link with Aadhaar or something, and we have to rely on what people had to say about that. And but his death is commemorated. His death is definitely in 1400 Common Era. So his father and mother are John and Agnes, and they were in London. And he was a part of the English army that fought against the French. He was captured and he was ransomed, and thus he learned his French. Then he rose in the ranks and was deployed as a diplomat that followed him, that allowed him to peer at a larger world than London. So his rise in the ranks of the court in the kingdom actually allowed him to go places. And when you go places, you achieve a lot of different experiences, which enriches you intellectually and culturally, and then you can write something as deep and something as broad as Canterbury Tales and other poems that he had written. So as far as his period of production is concerned, it could be more or less divided into three parts: the French period of 10 years from 1370 to 1380, and then the Italian from 1381 to 1386, and then English finally from 1387 to 1400. Of course, do not ever take these periods seriously, because I'm just one person saying that, okay, we can divide these periods into these parts, but we should not be very complacent about sorry, these divisions, because this is just done for convenience. And yes, this could also be a very important question in your net exam, these periods. But other than that, if you are really into learning about literature or Chaucer, do not take these periods to be seriously. This is just done to kind of conveniently understand what he was doing and when he was doing. He was known as the father of English literature and the morning star of Renaissance. So again, net questions. So, and he was perhaps the first poet to be buried in the Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey, where many other famous poets were buried after their death. Style. Chaucer's style. His style imbibed a truly uniquely comic vision. We often discuss this issue that there is a serious dearth of comic literature or humorous literature in the old, middle, and in the Chaucerian time also. There's just one play that I can remember is kind of humorous or kind of comic. That is the Grammar Girton's Needle, or Ralph Royster Doyster, or other name of that might be. And of course, there were interludes. But these interludes, or even this Grammar Girton's Needle, I believe, and you can disagree with me, I believe they were more farcical than being comic. If you had the misfortune of attending my earlier lectures, I had tried to be, I wanted to be humorous. I wanted to, inject a sense of comic temperament, comic energy into my PPTs, which is definitely missing this time. But comic, the true nature of comedy, the humorous view of the world, was first seen, according to me, in Chaucer's style and in Chaucer's character portraiture. If you read Canterbury Tales, you will definitely find the portraits being very comic, not farcical, comic in their appearance. For example, the appearance of the monk The monk is plump. The monk has a belly like me. I do, like it's, I'm fat, and this monk is fat too. But being a monk, you cannot be fat. I mean, and he likes to eat the meat of venison, deer meat, and that's why he's fat. And he likes to hunt. So in without trying to make us laugh, Chaucer was actually make us smile. Of course, there are people who can make you laugh and there are people who can make you smile. So Chaucer was making us smile, and hence his style is uniquely comical. Not, I mean, something that many people have tried and failed to imitate. The way in which he described his characters was definitely comic. I already pointed out this wide and deep sense of humanism. That is, even when Chaucer was drawing a, a possible enemy in the form of the plowman, he was empathetic towards him. He pointed out that no, this guy is really very simple, this guy is really very good, and he is a nice person. So this shows a deep and wide sense of humanism. And even when he is making fun of the church characters, he is not ironic. I mean, he's ironic, of course. He's not thorny. He is not attacking them mercilessly. His satire is more of a Horatian kind, mild, humorous, genial. And if you read the character portrait of the prioress, she wears this armband made of gold, and there it is written Amor Vincent Omnia. So a prioress, like a head nun, has a tattoo or has a brooch which says love conquers all, which is kind of funny, but it is also it is something that actually makes these characters come alive. They are unique characters. The use of appropriate phrases. Now, Chaucer did not rush with his portraits, and thus he could finish only a small part of his entire plan. He planned to have a grand, like 100 plus stories, which are just like 20 to 24 stories are complete. So, but that one of the reasons as to why, because he waited for the appropriate phrase to come to him. He did not put pressure on the phrases to mean something. If it meant something, then Chaucer brought it into his poetry. Even if you read the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales, you would find that how beautifully he captures the essence of April, of the spring season. Sorry. Okay. So genius use of meter, the decasyllabic lines from front. So he actually took up these decasyllabic lines from French poetry. Perhaps he was listening to a French person sing or write poetry when he was in jail. I'm just joking. So, I mean, of course, they knew French because they were like rich people. They were people, important people, and they knew French. So their format was still French, decasyllabic lines, but the meter was gradually becoming English. And the meter, the heroic verse, the heroic couplets kind of things that Chaucer uses in his various works is called to be genius because he was bringing an unyielding masculine language into feminine meter, which was something very difficult to be done, and it was something that only a poet of Chaucer's caliber could have done. The fresh outlook towards subject of his poem. So he always looked at the subjects of his poem very empathetically. No person was bad enough, no person was poor enough, no person was insignificant enough to miss his observation, miss his gaze of love. Each and every character, each and every uh, portrait is done with a fresh outlook. In fact, if you read deeply into the portraits of the pardoner and the summoner, you would find that there is some kind of a homosexual relationship between the pardoner and the summoner. It becomes important, especially during this June month, the Pride month. Okay? So he always had this fresh outlook towards the subjects of his poem. Now, as a mature poet, Chaucer was able to combine the courtly and bourgeois conventions of literature. That is another of his contribution. So I already told that I already discussed that the romances were having a kind of a impact on literature in general, and that was courtly love. Okay, the kings and the queens and their love, their romance, their machinations will be portrayed in the novel. And then the bourgeois conventions of literature, the bourgeois conventions that were growing in England. So fitting the the romance model into a more pragmatic, practical bourgeois uh, model was something that Chaucer done, and thanks to Chaucer, that this courtly romance, that this courtly literature could yield itself to the middle class mentality of the later English people. He introduced realism instead of courtly romance. Realism in the sense of the portraits which have been described by Chaucer, realism in the tales that have been told by the parson and by Meliboeus, by the other people who have given us a real picture of the society. And we also find this realism imbibed in the very appearance of the characters. The poorer characters are appearing either on foot or on donkeys, and the richer characters are wearing good shoes and they are like riding on big horses, comfortable horses, and so on and so forth. So let's go to the next one. Now, I wanted to bring this up in order to the the things that I already am speaking about. So this is an extract from the Nun's Priest Tale. I will not read the entire 20 lines, but in this description, in these lines, we do find some aspects of Chaucer's style as far as his humanism goes, as far as his use of comedy goes, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can just take up any part of Chaucer's poetry, and you will still find that the same aspects of humanism, comic vision, and humorous approach to a situation is mentioned. Okay. These are the character portraits themselves. And John Dryden, in his preface to the Fables, published in 1700, says that here is God's plenty. In the characters that Chaucer builds, in the way in which he builds these characters, they are so varied, they are so different from each other. they are so responsive to our gaze of questioning, our gaze of satire, that we will remember each and every one of them only if we read them once. Now, I will do a little exercise. I mean, a silent exercise, because of course, I mean, you won't be able to speak, or I will not be able to see even the comments if there are any in the chat box. But try to identify who is which character, which might take you a bit of time. But if you read the text and then you come back and try to point out that who is what, then I am sure that these characters would kind of come alive to you. You will find them that, okay, so this is the description that Chaucer was talking about. So there are like um, two people, two women over here who can be easily distinguished from the way they are dressed. And then this person can be easily understood who this could be. This fat person, of course, you can make out who this person can be. So I did not deliberately name, sorry, I did not deliberately name these people here, but I want you to write down the names of the characters, like first from left or first from right, whichever direction you want to take. And maybe when you read the text, we will come to understand who is what. Okay, I'll not dwell on this any further, but these are such characters whom we will remember for the rest of our I won't say for the rest of our lives, but until we are reading this Canterbury Tales, we will remember these characters. Okay, next is the Canterbury Tales itself, and this is just a graphic Chaucerian kind of reflection on the Canterbury Tales. So this poem belongs to the English group, and it has been influenced from Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, which was a collection of like 100 stories, and he had this ambition of going for 100 plus stories, but he couldn't finish them. So as you know that there were 29 pilgrims, including Chaucer himself, and each pilgrim is supposed to tell 2 stories on their onward journey and 2 while they return. So there were supposed to be 160 tales or so. Okay. I mean 160 tales because there were the owner of the inn also joined them, as far as I remember, and hence it was 160 tales. So a net question could be like, how many stories were they supposed to tell? What was the plan? How many stories were supposed to be told by each pilgrim? There were like 4 stories that each pilgrim would tell, and there was this competition that whoever tells the best story gets to have a meal, gets to eat for free in the Tabard Inn. So there are 20 complete stories and 4 partly complete ones. So almost all walks of life represented except the king and the beggars, as I pointed out. And the pilgrims united at the Tabard Inn. So the name of the inn was Tabard. And there are, other than these 2 prose tales, the tale of Meliboeus and the Parson's Tale, all the other tales, all the other 20 complete or the other 4 partly complete tales were in poetry, were in the format of poem. But Tale of Meliboeus and Parson's Tale were the only 2 tales which were written in the prose format. I can see a number of messages in the chat box, but I will not go there right now. Okay, another work of Chaucer is called the Parliament of Fowls. And this is the spelling that he used, but it should be FOWLES, fowls. Birds, especially. You can see the image here. This is the parliament of the fowls. It belongs to the Italian group. Okay, the period of poetry before Chaucer turned to writing exclusively in English. And it is here that Chaucer's comic spirit comes alive. Here he is at his comical best. And it is like of 700 lines approximately. It is in the format of a dream vision. Chaucer imagines that he has gone into the Parliament of Fowls. He dreams as if, and it is composed in rhyme royal. Okay, and it has reference. And interestingly, I just found it's a kind of a trivia that I found out that it has the reference to Valentine's Day as a special day for lovers. It is one of the very first texts where the Valentine's Day was mentioned in special reference to lovers, and it was before the Western media took over and said that Valentine's Day is like a very special day and so on and so forth. Anyway, so that's about Parliament of Fowls. Next is the Legend of Good Women. Now, it also belongs to the Italian group. It also belongs to the Italian period. And the plan was of 19 tales. He could complete only 8, and the 9th had just begun. And he wrote it in the format, he wrote it in the style of heroic couplet, which I already pointed out that he was experimenting with heroic couplet. And in this Legend of Good Women, he was trying to talk about all the famous women in the world, and including Cleopatra. So Cleopatra or Joan of Arc, he was talking about, he was trying to create a repertoire of great leaders, female leaders, or great female personalities throughout the ages. And he includes Cleopatra and Joan of Arc. So that shows that Chaucer had an understanding of the female character also, and hence his prioress, his nun, his wife of Bath is so well developed because he had studied these women. He has studied these portraits earlier. Next, his influence on literature. Just a minute, did I miss something? No. Okay. Now, his influence on literature. Now, the image on your side is on the right is actually a latest version of the Canterbury Tales, and it is in the graphic format. And since Dr. Banerjee informed that I am dabbling, I'm researching comic books and stuff, so I tried to find if Canterbury Tales exists in the graphic format or not, and I found that this book, I think it was published in 2012, more or less. And this here, Wife of Bath, instead of riding a horse, is riding a motorbike. So this shows that Canterbury Tales is still being told in various formats. It shows how great Chaucer's influence is on English literature. So he created a framework from narrative poetry. Before that, narrative poetry existed, of course, but it was in the epic format. But he created a separate genre of narrative poetry with the help of his narrative poems, among which Canterbury Tales can be put at the highest pedestal. Okay. And then he was followed by the Scottish Chaucerians. So there was the Scottish king, James the First, Robert Henryson, William Dunbar, Gavin Douglas. They were the Scottish Chaucerians. I remember there was this question in net once, that who were the Scottish Chaucerians, or who among them is an odd man out. And so we can, I included this section here, that James the First, Robert Henryson, William Dunbar, and Gavin Douglas were some of the most famous Scottish Chaucerians, known so because they were Scottish. As far as their nation was concerned, they were Scottish, but they followed Chaucer. So the king is Cahir of James celebrates love and its fulfillment through trials and adversities. Dunbar's Twa Married Women and the Widow was influenced by Chaucer's Wife of Bath's prologue, while Douglas's The Palace of Honor shows a debt to Chaucer's House of Fame. So this is what Chaucer's influence in a nutshell is. Like, he influenced people who were writing a century later, but Chaucer's Canterbury Tales have been adapted into so many formats, including a graphic novel adapted by Seymour Chost. I mean, in our graduation days, we had this question, we had this topic, that comment on the influence of Chaucer on English language. So his influence on English language is huge, and it was he who helped earn respect for English and pushed it on its way to become a literary language. It was an oral language. It was he who helped it onward become a literary language. He helped to standardize the language to the dialect of East Midland, which we have been discussing earlier also. This is another of his book, which I should have put earlier, the Book of Duchess. Now, it belongs to his French period, and it was written in 1639 after the death of John Gaunt's wife, Blanche of Lancaster. And it is one of the earliest of his major poems in French. Okay, it was later translated. And John of Gaunt, as you can understand, was the patron of Chaucer. Then he also wrote, or rather adapted, this Romance of the Rose, which was also of the French period, and it's a translation of Les Romans de la Rose, a French allegory. And there is a lot of controversy regarding the authorship of this poem. Not the French poem, but whether Chaucer really translated this work or really adapted this work or not. There's a lot of bad blood among researchers trying to say for or against the authorship of Romance of the Rose as far as Chaucer is concerned. Let's come to his contemporary, Chaucer's contemporary, William Langland or Langley. And these question marks after the year of birth and death are made in order to show that we are not sure. Even the researcher is not sure that whether exactly in 1332 Langland was born, or whether exactly in 1400 he died or not. So his major contribution is the vision of William concerning Pliers the Plowman. So Pliers the Plowman is the short title, but the whole title is The Vision of William Concerning Pliers the Plowman, and it was published in 1362. And it is an allegory that vents its anger on the corrupt church and highlights the daily struggle of the common people through abstract images like wit, study, faith, etc. Of course, it's an allegory, and in an allegory, there are like abstractions, and Pius the Plowman is a story where the good people are always suffering until the Messiah plier the plowman comes as a Messiah and saves the people uh, from the from their suffering, and he fights the corrupt forces. It shows the terrible hardships of the peasants vividly, which Chaucer never did or never can do, because he belonged to a more wealthy, more powerful uh, strata of the society. But William Langland did provide a very vivid picture of the hardships of the peasantry during his time. His style is simple, alliterative, rhymeless. He used rhymeless measures, unlike Chaucer. You see, even when the English literature was just getting born, there were so different strands of um, expressions. Like Langland was alliterative and rhymeless, Chaucer was rhyming. He was using rhyme royal. He was using uh, uh, heroic couplets, and he was not using alliteration deliberately. Next comes John Gower, and his birth is unknown, but his death was in 1408, and he wrote this piece called Speculum Meditantis in French, then Vox Calamantis in Latin, and finally Confessio Amantis in English, though the name suggests that it is kind of Latin, but the name is Latin, but he has written it in English. And I had a hard time trying to pronounce these names. I'm sorry if I pronounce them wrong. So this Confessio Amantis is a conventional allegory with the setting of the seven deadly sins, and it is written in octosyllabic couplets. So here also we find the reign of allegory as such going on. No realism, no pragmatic, everyday realistic images, but the images of the seven deadly sins are presented here, and they are written in octosyllabic couplets. Next comes John Barber. Now, John Barber was actually a person from Scotland, and this is the image that I could find from internet. And I am sure there are better images. I was just lazy and thought that, this is how John Barber would look, or at least a part of his face might look. So he was perhaps born in 1316, and he was dead by 1395. And his main creation, his chief creation, was called Bruce, and it was published in 1375. And it's the story of the struggle of Scotland to attain freedom from the English, starting from 1286 till the death of Bruce in 1332. So Robert of Bruce, the famous Scottish king, is elucidated, is eulogized in this poem Bruce, and it records the struggle of this king versus the English forces from 1286 till his death in 1332. Then comes John Mandeville, who is more of a prose writer. We will now talk more about the prose writers. However, John Mandeville, as the research suggests, did not really exist. He was actually the French person, Jehan or Jean de Mandeville, was more of a real person than John Mandeville. So he compiled, he did not really write, but he actually compiled the French Book of Travels from 1357 to 1371. He also compiled, sorry for the wrong spelling of several books of voyages, including that of even Marco Polo. And his narrations and descriptions are really very vivid, setting the standards high for other travelogues like or fake travelogues like Jonathan Swift to give descriptions of various places. John Wycliffe, 1320 to 1384. He was an ecclesiastical controversialist. So he deliberately went not on air, but he wrote pamphlets which created a lot of controversy among people. He was like kind of, in the absence of any proper example, I would say Roddur Rai of academics, that he would say something that would create a lot of flutter in the ecclesiastical fraternity, and he will deliberately say something which will create some kind of a controversy. And he wrote mainly in Latin, and his themes were usually revolutionary. He did make a number of translations of Bible from 1382 to 1395, and this is the famous Wycliffe's Bible. And one of the earlier examples of the translations of Bible is by Wycliffe, and it is from 1382 to 1395. His another work of importance is The Last Age of the Church, published in 1356. Sir Thomas Malory, birth unknown. He was definitely born, but I do not know what date he was born. And you can see that he is not within this 1450 period. He dies in 1471, and he is associated, if not always credited, with the creation of the Death of Arthur, one of the Arthurian legends, one of the Arthurian romances, which was basically in French, which he translated or which he wrote himself. There are a lot of controversy of that, but much research have favored that Sir Thomas Malory is at least to a large extent the writer of the Death of Arthur. Now, when we have seen a number of prose writers and a number of poets, we can have a look at the development of the various forms of literature during this age of Chaucer. So this period of transition and experiment came to an end. Within this 100 years, as I was saying, that Chaucer was experimenting with this form and that form, and there was a transition happening not just from feudalism to merchant economy, but even in literature, this transition from alliteration and this transition from heroic themes and this transition from only religious themes into more bourgeois objects of aesthetic pleasure, and also the experiment with form and meter was also coming to an end. Now, an exclusive English style came to the fore with a clear delineation of the future path. English style, I think I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but this English style is what? It is the style that favors a bourgeois public. Crisp, short, to the point, pragmatic, less emotional, less mushy stuff, more to deal with everyday life, more to deal with a Dickensian world. Of course, Dickens was like sorry, 450 or so years late. But English style was something that was more direct, other than the florid representations of the French romances. And it cleared the path for the future writers. They knew that the writers who were going to follow Chaucer, who were going to grow up reading Chaucer, knew which path to follow. The meter started to become simpler with rhyme royal and other shorter verses coming into play. Earlier, the meter, the elegiac meter or the epic meter, was pretty difficult for the common person to follow or to hum. But with the rhyme royal, especially with the heroic couplet, now people started to remember the lines because they could be now hummed and sung. And other short verses were coming into play. I will remind that I will say that it was during this period that Petrarch had already started writing his sonnets in Italy, and it was only a matter of time when this shortening meter will automatically adopt to or adapt the shorter 14 line sonnet borrowed or exported from Italy. However, there was the revival of the alliterative verse. Like there were a few poems which did continue with the alliterative verse. And for example, we have the Vinier and Vaster of 1352, which is an anonymous poem. As I said, that there would be some examples of anonymous poem in this age also. Pious Plowman, as the title itself suggests, is you know uh, alliterative, and it was published in 1362. So French and Latin were mouthful words even back then, as they are today. They are difficult to be pronounced. They are difficult to be remembered, especially for a nation, for a culture which do not use it in an everyday manner. But it was still in fashion. Poets did want to have um, these mouthful words, these bombastic words to be used in their poem or prose accordingly. Now, that was about poetry. This is about prose. So prose was still immature and it was still looking for its own space. It was groping around. It was seeing, okay, where is its own place? It was not sure that it had found a foothold, but it was groping around, and soon it will find its own space. Then it was prose was a mixture of dominant French and subservient English. While in poetry, there was the English poets had a freedom of using indigenous English words, but when it came to prose, the prose writers became a little conscious and they kept English subservient to dominant French, because most of it was composed in French and less of it was composed in English, because English was still not the language of the court. English was still not the language of the elite. And if you want to, score a point with the court people or the people of the administration, or you need to show off, or even if you need to impress a woman, you perhaps have to speak in French rather than, or you have to write in French than in English. So if you write a love letter in English, there are chances that your proposal might get accepted rather than if you write in DAATH English. I mean, back then, English was DAATH. And with Mallory, the individual style found its foothold. Earlier, there was a kind of a conscious collective way of going about a work. But to write individually, to write from the subjective point of view, was first introduced by Mallory. Because even in Meliboeus's tale and Parsons' tale, Chaucer was not subjective. They were telling the tale of someone else. But Mallory wanted to go, personal. He wanted to inject a kind of an individuality in his expressions, in his style. And it was he who could be regarded as the one of the founding members of the individual strain, which came later in the Romantic age, especially. So to conclude, we can say that this period saw the gradual coming out of the English literary realm from the Middle Ages towards modernity. Not modernity with the capital M, not modernism, but an advance from whatever was lacking in the Middle Ages. And Chaucer helped both the English language and literature to make this leap. And poetry took the pole position, of course, ahead of prose and became the chief mode of artistic expression. And the poets of this period indeed paved the way for the birth of the literary renaissance in England, which was, as I said, I mean, if you look at 1400, maybe another 50, 80 years later, Renaissance was knocking on the doors of Europe and England. So I have compiled this shabby looking bibliography. And of course, I am sure that you will be provided with the PPT, but you can take a screenshot. And I am trying to remove this somewhere, but okay, I don't know how to remove it completely. So you can take a screenshot with this ugly panel coming in between, making my bibliography uglier. However, one of the drawbacks of this bibliography is now I see, other than this Riverside Chaucer, which was published in 2008, is that it is dated. It is like old. But I still took it because A, I was lazy. B, I thought I had read one or two among them. They are solid in what they are saying. I mean, they have not taken into consideration the research of the last 60 or so years, but before that, they have very good points to be made. So I took it up as in my bibliography. But basically, I was lazy. I did not go about finding what is the latest book published by Routledge on Chaucer. Sorry for that. Okay, so that brings us to the end of my deliberation. And well, this is, if you have any questions, if you have any queries, suggestions, then you might email me at this email ID, and I would try to answer your queries to the best of my ability. So I am stopping the share, and I want to go back. I had to say today, and I would now, I'm ready to take on questions, if any.
Thank you, Dr. Pritesh, for a very elaborative, in-depth understanding and sharing some important points of this particular age. And I'm sure the participants today have benefited. Those who are aware of the age, they have got some insights. I expect the participants to sit and prepare notes while our resource person is teaching, and involve in productive activities. Like when you are asked to ask questions, you should focus on that. If you have participated the entire session, your resource person is all out here to try and answer to your queries. So when a question is being put, that please post your questions, please try to focus on what is being asked rather than putting forward your things. We know what has to be done from our side. Let us do our work, and you please focus on your parts. We never share notes for some of the very hardworking students who have come today for notes. This is not the platform. However, we share some research materials which our resource persons share with us, and that we forward in the Telegram group, which we are in the process of creating it. I would just like to repeat myself that these are independent academic endeavors which we do. This is not our profession which we do in the evening, rather our resource person or myself. So you need to give time, you need to have patience. I know you all are very young youth of India who lacks a lot of patience, but is having a lot of concentration and hard work to rely on. And we are very proud of our youth, and we are very we expect a lot of good things from our youth. So please, I request from you all, don't take me otherwise. But our youth, because you all are youth, should spend more time on reading rather than notes, rather than PPT. We don't promote plagiarism as well. So PPT, we keep it for ourselves, not with the participants. And PPT, whatever Dr. Pritesh has shared, most of it you can find anywhere. But what was important was the ideas that he, explained. He gave some very interesting examples, and we expect you all to, in a very shorthand type notes you jotted down, so that this session is a value addition session for all of you. I'm sure many of you all have enjoyed the session. The testimony is to the fact that there are plethora of messages. Dr. Pritesh is always very informative and interesting in his presentation. Now let us come to a few questions that has been put. I saw a very one-liner question. As you know, Dr. Pritesh, this is a heterogeneous group ranging from graduation first year to PhDs. So there's a question that what is the basic, this is by Vikas Nayak, and the question is, what is the basic difference between comical and farcical? Yeah, just a sec. Yeah, you can now unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So the difference between comical and farcical, that's a very interesting question. Farcical is trying to make you laugh by appealing to your baser instincts. Like, you laugh if, say, Dr. Banerjee would push me off my seat and I will fall and I will cry. You might start laughing looking at that. My pain will amuse you, will make you laugh. So this kind of physical horseplay, this kind of engaging in physical activities rather than appealing to your mind is something farcical. Whereas comical is something that will tickle you, something that will tickle your intelligence. As I said, that the difference between farce and comical activities, farcical activities would make you laugh, and comical endeavors will make you smile, will make you enriched in your mind. And farce is, as I said, it will appeal to your baser instincts. It is more visual, it is more carnal, it is more material, as opposed to comical, which is more intellectual and spiritual. I don't know if I could answer your question, but that is the beginning of the difference between farce and comic.
Right. Thank you. The next question is by Hansmita, and she says that, can we say that the exclusion of the two extreme social classes from the tales shows that the royalty and beggars were not meant to read the tale at all?
If I understand your question correctly, you're trying to say that since they were not meant to read, okay, I can understand that the beggars could not read, but as I said, that the tales could be told via orality also. I mean, there could be like sessions where one person would read and the others would hear. So in that case, a beggar sitting at the end of the circle might still hear. But why won't the king read it? Maybe because he's too busy. But what I think is the reason as to why the king and the beggar is absent, because the king will not accompany a bunch of pilgrims on a pilgrimage journey. I mean, it's like asking for Narendra Modi to go with a picnic with us. I mean, so his stature is that of a king, or any other king, and the king and the queen are too elite to accompany pilgrims to a particular pilgrimage spot. Similarly, beggars and other lower people of other lower strata uh, will not be able to enter into this tabard, and they will not really make this. They were not supposed to make this pilgrimage. I mean, they were supposed to stay at pilgrimage spots, like beggars in our society are. So I believe there was a practical reason that these two stratas were excluded. But I understand your point about reading Canterbury Tales, but I'm not even sure if the Reeve or the Pardoner or the Miller could actually read back then. Dr. Banerjee, you might comment on this. That what was the condition of education? As far as I understand, the education was only for the church people or only for the elite, not for the common run of men. So
Yeah,
even the common people.
I agree with you that the king not participating, absolutely what you have said, that this is generally a common pilgrimage that has been taken by a group of people ranging from different strata of the society. The beggars can be on many aspects, as you said, that it is, they are the most marginal lot in the society. So marginal not only in sense of economy, but marginal socially, marginal educationally. Anyway, they are the most marginal group. So, or in fact, they were not given that importance. They were not, as people like wife of Bath, they were not considered human beings. So one thing that might be also the popular sentiment of that time, that if you also include beggar in that group, that might demean the whole creation as a whole, because the word itself, beggar itself, does not fit in it. So yeah,
Right,
there are many connotations we can get, but primarily, if you ask me, your reason for the king is absolutely fine, and beggar, because I think they were marginal socially and economically, and of course were not considered to have had any kind of slightest of chance and opportunity during that period to be able to be in a condition to read and write.
Yeah, to mix with people also. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. That's correct. Yeah. So
There's one more question from Pearl. I think Pearl is something which is not the name. I would request all the participants to please ensure that your Zoom name is as per your name. That helps things, because if you directly log in for any mobile ID, it becomes difficult for us to let you in also. This question is, I think you would like to comment on this. The question is with reference to the three different, three periods of Chaucer's writings. Can it be considered that Chaucer could have been one of the early founders in comparative literature?
Comparative literature. That would have been a fancy term back then, given the fact that literature itself was never taught as a discipline. But other than this technical problem with considering Chaucer to become one of the pioneers of comparative literature, I think all of English literature back then could have been comparative, because there were influences from other pieces of work, other languages into English language. I mean, English language itself is taken from so many sources. That I remember one of these things being said about England, that we take our cuisine from the French, we take our weapons from the Germans, we take our pizza from Americans, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think if seen in that way, we can say that since not only Chaucer, but Gower also writing in 3 different languages could be considered to be the pioneers of comparative literature. But instead of comparing, which was done by later critics, I think they were more into adapting or translating these other literatures into their own. And if that is a practice of comparative literature, which I am not aware of, if that is a practice of comparative literature, then there you go. You have like the grandfather of comparative literature in form of Chaucer.
Thank you. Next question is from Tariq Ali, and Tariq asks that did Chaucer use English for Canterbury Tales voluntarily, since it was a language of the common people, for its popularity, or was it just luck?
I honestly do not have the answer for this. Um, somebody pointed this out, and I think that person is right, that English became the court language way back in 1360s. Somebody did point that out. But that had nothing to do with what Chaucer had in mind, I think. Chaucer basically had included characters from almost all walks of life. And the king, the knight and the squire or the prioress were just some people, okay, 3 people. Otherwise, most of them belonged to the common rungs of the society. And as I was pointing out, as the years progressed, England was becoming more and more linguistically self-sufficient. And hence, what Tariq is trying to say is that, yes, Chaucer did consider this fact that will more and more people read if I write in English, or will it be more valuable, will it be more useful for me if I write in French or Latin. However, let us also discuss this issue that books, libraries, book production was not really that popular, that there will be a consideration on the part of the writer that, okay, if I write in this language, then I will be able to sell this many books. So maybe Chaucer, by the end of towards the end of his career, was becoming more and more confident of himself and his narrative art, and hence he thought that, okay, I have created some good works in Italian and French, why not go for English as well, given the target audience, given the character pool that he has created. And also, since he is creating the portraits from the common rung of the society, from the common English world, it will do justice to them if they are described in common English, vernacular English. That's my take on this choice of Chaucer on English as a language for Canterbury Tales. But that's all I can say.
Thank you. We take the last question of the day. The question, it's very interesting, but it's a lengthy question, so please bear with me. This is by Divya Sajnani. And Divya asks that in Adam Scriven, Chaucer himself criticizes his copier for copying wrongly. And in his retraction too, he signs himself as the compiler. And there were, I think, around 55 manuscripts, none of which were ever signed by Chaucer himself. And then they all were collected into one track of Canterbury Tales. So which one to actually go after, and how can we still call out this imaginary person Chaucer who was repeated, copied wrongly, or with his copyist personal distractions?
Okay, this is beyond my pay grade. How to confirm whether there was somebody called Chaucer? There are government notes that this is Geoffrey Chaucer. He is going over there. He is like employed here. There is like a contract between the governor, the mayor kind of London and Chaucer, which shows that Chaucer was a real person. Another way to understand if Chaucer had really written those pieces is that there are subtle references to Chaucer himself, which was very common among middle-aged poets, to himself. And those subtle references have helped researchers to pin the fact that at least this tale is written by Chaucer. More importantly, the style, the usage of the words are found to be consistently Chaucerian in a number of texts. It is by these means that, say, suppose a single comma has been repeated at the same position in all his works consistently, which could not have been a mistake, which could not be a mistake, which could not have been copied wrongly so many times. But yes, what you are saying is true. How do we put our finger on this imaginary Chaucer? I do not have an answer. I do not. I'm very ill-read on this, and I cannot help you put your finger on this. I'm so sorry.
You are being too humble. Thank you for patiently answering all the variety, heterogeneous questions. And that's the beauty of this session. Since we always have heterogeneous groups, we always come up with, there are always questions which are interesting. And this is a gathering of all the literary enthusiasts, where our main aim is to have mental feasting every time we gather together. So thank you very much, Dr. Pritesh, on behalf of Team DAATH VOYAGE. Absolutely, it was an honor, as usual, to interact, to be a part of your session, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And looking forward again to somehow get hold of you in the near future. I know you are a busy person academically, so yeah, thank you very much. It is people like y'all who support us, and it is people like y'all's dedication that has brought the reputation and fame of this platform. And that's the reason why you were able to survive for more than 2 years and have conducted more than 17 lecture series and have more than 5,000 participants who have participated. So on behalf of Team DAATH VOYAGE, once again, thank you very much. Please take care. Good night. Meet you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.